I'm Claire. 1 year ago, I stood in the middle of a glamorous charity gala, watching my husband deliver a heartfelt speech about love and survival, while his eyes drifted toward the woman who had just shattered our 12-year marriage. In that moment, the crystal champagne flute slipped from my hand and crashed to the floor, just like the life I thought we had. From a devoted wife standing quietly in the background, I turned my pain into the sharpest weapon and exposed every lie in front of an entire city. Before I share the full story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to rise from a heartbreak you thought would destroy you, hit like and subscribe. Because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The crystal champagne flute slipped from my fingers at the Trinity Hospital Charity Gala, shattering against the marble floor like my 12-year marriage. Nobody noticed the glass. They were all watching Aaron, my husband, as he delivered his keynote about beating cancer and saving lives. But I wasn't watching him. I was watching her. Addison Grace stood near the French doors, her emerald dress catching the chandelier light, and the way Aaron's eyes found hers between sentences told me everything I needed to know. After 12 years, you learn to read the silences between words, the spaces where truth lives. "Claire, darling, are you all right?" Margaret Whitmore, my mother-in-law, touched my elbow. The concern in her voice was genuine. She'd loved me ever since I'd nursed her son back from the brink of death. "Just clumsy," I managed, stepping away from the glittering shards. A waiter appeared instantly, sweeping away the evidence. If only the rest could be cleaned up so easily. Aaron was wrapping up his speech now, his surgeon's hands gesturing with the same precision he used in the OR. Because sometimes, the people who save us become our reason to keep fighting. His eyes found mine across the room, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. Vulnerable, grateful, mine. Then his gaze shifted, just slightly, and I followed it back to her. I'd built our life like a portfolio, diversified, balanced, secure. Our Victorian mansion in Charleston's historic district, the charity boards, the perfect dinner parties where doctors and financiers mingled over wine I'd carefully selected. We were the couple others envied, featured in Charleston Living magazine just last month. The Whitmores, "When Love Conquers All," the headline had read. Standing there, watching my husband's micro-expressions betray him, I realized I'd been analyzing the wrong market trends. The changes started small, like hairline cracks in porcelain. Aaron began leaving his phone face down at dinner. His Tuesday surgeries started running late. So late that the OR charge nurse, Linda, mentioned at the hospital fundraiser that she was surprised how dedicated Dr. Whitmore had become to evening consultations. I knew Addison before I knew she was Addison. 3 months ago, she'd consulted on our home gallery renovation, suggesting pieces that would speak to our souls. She had an artist's eye and a therapist's ability to read people. Over tea in my kitchen, she'd asked about Aaron's recovery, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup as I described those terrifying months of chemo. "You must have an incredible bond," she'd said, and something in her voice made me look up. Trauma either breaks couples apart or fuses them forever. Now, sitting in my home office at 2 a.m., I pulled up Aaron's fitness app on my laptop. We'd synced our devices years ago for health insurance discounts. His heart rate data told a story. Spikes at 9 p.m. on Thursdays. Elevated levels sustained for hours. The GPS showed him at the hospital, but the cardiac patterns suggested something more recreational than surgical. I closed the laptop and walked to his study. That's when I noticed it. A locked drawer I'd never seen locked before. My financial brain kicked in. When assets are hidden, there's always a reason. But I didn't pick the lock. Not yet. First, I needed more data. The next morning, Aaron kissed my cheek before leaving, and I smelled it. Jasmine and oil paint. Nothing like the antiseptic and coffee that usually clung to him. "Late surgery again tonight?" I asked, buttering my toast with steady hands. "Probably, complex case." He didn't meet my eyes. "Don't wait up. After 12 years, you know when someone's portfolio is being restructured without you." 3 weeks later, I sat in my car outside Aaron's office, rain drumming against the windshield. The building was dark except for his corner window. I told him I was at book club, discussing Eat, Pray, Love with the other doctors' wives. Instead, I was about to eat crow, pray for strength, and realize love wasn't what I thought it was. The locked drawer had been laughably easy to open. Aaron might be brilliant with a scalpel, but he was careless with secrets. Inside, handwritten letters in purple ink, 2 airline tickets to Vermont dated last month when he was supposedly at a medical conference, and a small oil painting. The painting stopped my breath. 2 figures dissolving into each other, signed AG with the inscription, "Let's disappear together." My phone buzzed. Marcus Chen, my old college friend who'd traded FBI work for teaching law, had agreed to meet me. Hypothetically, I'd asked him over coffee, if someone wanted to track a spouse's activities without breaking any laws, hypothetically, he had replied, sliding a business card across the table. This PI specializes in infidelity cases, legally. The private investigator's report arrived within a week. Aaron and Addison at a cabin in Vermont, registered under false names. Aaron transferring money from his personal account to an art nonprofit, Addison's nonprofit. Security footage of them entering the Marriott downtown at 2 p.m. on a Thursday when Aaron's surgery schedule showed him in the OR. But it was the background check on Addison that made me pour my first afternoon whiskey in years. 2 previous affairs with married men, both in the medical field. Both families destroyed, both men left financially and professionally ruined. She was a collector, and my husband was her latest acquisition. I drove home in the rain, thinking about the night Aaron had been diagnosed. How I'd held his hand through chemo, cleaned up after him, researched every trial and treatment. How he'd sobbed in my arms, promising he'd spend whatever time he had left making me happy. Time's funny that way. It makes liars of us all. The Charleston Library's newspaper archives smelled like old secrets. I'd taken a week off work, telling my clients I had a family emergency. It wasn't a lie. Addison Grace. Born. Addison Moreau in Baton Rouge. Reinvented in Atlanta. Perfected in Charleston. The society pages loved her. Young artist making waves. Cultural activist. Patron of causes. What they didn't print was the trail of destroyed marriages behind her, or the psychiatric hold in Georgia after her first target's wife confronted her publicly. Borderline personality disorder, Marcus explained when I shared what I'd found. They create intense, immediate bonds. Make their targets feel like the most important person in the world. I thought about Aaron's cancer, how vulnerable he'd been, how Addison had asked all those questions about his recovery. She'd studied him through me, learned his weaknesses over tea in my kitchen. The most damning discovery came from forensic accounting, my specialty finally proving useful. The art nonprofit Aaron was funding? It was hemorrhaging money, but Addison's personal accounts were flourishing. She wasn't just collecting hearts. She was collecting dividends. That night, Aaron came home early, surprising me in the kitchen. For a moment, we stood there like strangers. "You look tired," he said. "Busy week." I stirred the soup I couldn't stomach. "How's your complex case?" "Resolved." He loosened his tie, the one I'd bought him for our anniversary. "Actually, I was thinking we should take a vacation. Maybe Vermont? I hear it's beautiful this time of year." The spoon clattered against the pot. "Vermont sounds lovely." He moved behind me, hands on my shoulders. "I know I've been distant. This case, it's been consuming me. But it's almost over." I wondered which case he meant, the surgical one or the Addison one. "When were you thinking?" "Next month, we could rent a cabin, disconnect from everything. Like you did last month with her," I thought but didn't say. Instead, I turned in his arms, studied the face I'd memorized through sickness and health. Let me check my calendar. Every good financial strategy requires patience, timing, and the ability to see 3 moves ahead. I applied the same principles to my marriage's dissolution. The Charleston Cultural Center accepted my proposal within days. A charity art exhibition to benefit cancer research, honoring survivors and their families. I named it Truth in Transparency, and made sure the irony was lost on everyone but me. We simply must have Addison Grace guest curate. gushed the center's director. Her eye for emerging talent is unmatched. My thoughts exactly, I agreed, signing the contract with Erin's favorite Mont Blanc pen. I threw myself into the planning with the dedication I'd once reserved for Erin's treatment schedules. Invitations went out to Charleston's medical elite, the hospital board, major donors. I made sure to include Erin's parents, who still credited me with saving their only son. "This is beautiful, Claire," my mother-in-law said when I showed her the plans. "Erin must be so proud." Erin, meanwhile, was distracted by his double life. He barely noticed when I suggested a weekend getaway to Kiowa Island, just the two of us, to reconnect before the gala. "That sounds perfect," he said, not looking up from his phone. "When?" "The weekend before the exhibition. I want us to be a united front for the donors." He agreed readily, probably relieved I wasn't suspicious. If only he knew I'd already installed recording devices in our beach house, perfectly legal since my name was on the deed. Addison accepted the curator position with enthusiasm, unaware she was walking into a carefully constructed trap. She even suggested featuring some of her own work, pieces that explore the intersection of desire and deception. "How perfect," I told her over lunch, my smile as carefully constructed as my portfolio. That's exactly the theme I had in mind. The Kiowa weekend exceeded my expectations. Wine loosened Erin's tongue, and guilt made him confessional. My hidden recorders captured everything: his affair, his love for Addison, his plan to leave after establishing her career through the nonprofit. He even admitted to lying about the late surgeries. "But Claire can never know," he slurred on the recording. "She saved my life. I owe her that much." Strange currency, this debt of gratitude. The gala arrived wrapped in perfect Charleston weather. I wore the silver gown from our 10th anniversary, the one Erin had said made me look like moonlight. He stood beside me at the entrance, playing the devoted husband one last time. "You've outdone yourself," he murmured, surveying the transformed cultural center. "Wait until you see the main exhibition," I promised. Addison swept in wearing red, bold as her intentions. She air-kissed my cheeks, and I smelled jasmine and betrayal. "Claire, this is magnificent. Thank you for trusting me with your vision." "Trust," I repeated, "is everything." The first hour proceeded flawlessly. Donors mingled, champagne flowed, and I watched Erin's eyes follow Addison around the room like a teenager with a crush. His parents arrived, his mother embracing me warmly. 20 minutes until the main presentation," I announced, guiding everyone toward the central gallery. "I think you'll find it illuminating." The room dimmed. The screen illuminated. My voice, pre-recorded and steady, began. "Art, at its core, is about truth. Tonight, I present Deception, a mixed-media installation exploring how we construct elaborate facades while our foundations crumble." The first image, Addison's painting from Erin's drawer, enlarged and annotated. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the inscription became visible. "Let's disappear together." Then came the receipts, the false names from Vermont, the money transfers. Each piece of evidence appeared like a brushstroke on a canvas. The audio from Kiowa began playing, Erin's voice confessing to the affair, clear and damning. I watched Erin's face cycle through shock, rage, and finally, a kind of resigned despair. Addison tried to leave, but the crowd had pressed in, phones already recording. The hospital board members exchanged glances that spelled the end of Erin's career. "This concludes our exhibition," I said into the microphone, my voice steady as my heartbeat wasn't. "Thank you all for supporting transparency in all its forms." The aftermath was swift. Erin's medical director pulled him aside before he could reach me. Addison found herself surrounded by former donors demanding answers about the nonprofit's finances. I slipped out through the kitchen, leaving them to face the consequences alone. My phone buzzed with messages: support from friends who'd suspected, shock from those who hadn't, and one from Marcus. Legally bulletproof, ethically gray, emotionally justified. Dinner Thursday? I sat in my car in the parking garage, still in my anniversary dress, and finally let myself cry. Not for the marriage I'd lost, that had been gone for months. I cried for the woman who'd believed that saving someone's life meant they'd save yours in return. The divorce papers were filed within a week. Aaron didn't contest anything. How could he? The medical board suspended his license pending investigation. Addison's nonprofit folded after donors withdrew support. The Charleston art scene, built on discretion and reputation, closed its doors to her. I sold the Victorian mansion to a young couple who promised to love it better than we had. The movers handled our things with clinical efficiency, dividing 12 years into boxes marked Claire and Aaron. I kept the dishes we'd received as wedding gifts, but left the bed where he'd whispered another woman's name in his sleep. My new cottage in Beaufort faced the ocean. Small, but mine. I'd traded crystal chandeliers for morning sunlight, charity galas for quiet dinners with real friends. My financial consulting practice evolved. Now I specialized in helping women protect their assets before, during, and after marriage. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd been blindsided by love. "You saved me," wrote one client, a senator's wife who'd discovered her husband hiding assets offshore. I thought I was going crazy. Aaron's mother called monthly, torn between loyalty to her son and affection for me. "I don't excuse what he did," she said during one call. "But Claire, you humiliated him publicly. Couldn't you have handled it privately?" "I could have," I admitted, watching dolphins play in the distance. "But silence protects the wrong people. He humiliated us privately for months. I just turned on the lights." She sighed, and I heard decades of Southern propriety wrestling with modern reality. "I suppose you're right. I miss you, dear." "I miss you too," I said, and meant it. Collateral damage. Another thing they don't mention in fairy tales. 6 months after the gala, I ran into Linda, the OR charge nurse, at a Beaufort farmer's market. "Dr. Whitmore's working at a clinic in Columbia now," she offered carefully. "Addison left the state entirely." "Good for them," I said, and found I meant that too. Anger, like chemotherapy, is poison that sometimes heals. But you can't live on poison forever. A year later, I stood before 300 people at TEDx Charleston, my hands steady on the podium. Financial intimacy, why money conversations matter more than you think, had drawn a sold-out crowd. "We teach our daughters to be independent," I began. "But we don't teach them what to do when independence becomes isolation within marriage. We celebrate joint bank accounts, but don't discuss joint accountability." In the audience, I spotted familiar faces. Former clients, new friends, and surprisingly, Ethan Mitchell. We'd been college study partners before life took us in different directions. Now Charleston's leading investigative journalist, he'd quietly helped ensure my gala exposé stayed within legal bounds. After my talk, he found me at the reception. "That was brave," he said, handing me a glass of wine. Red, not champagne. He'd remembered. "Brave or bitter?" I asked, old insecurities surfacing. "Honest," he corrected, "which is the bravest thing of all." We talked until the venue closed, then continued over coffee at a 24-hour diner. He showed me his latest investigation, medical billing fraud that made Aaron's indiscretions look quaint. I shared my plans to expand the consulting practice, maybe write a book. "No revenge memoir," he teased. Charleston's had enough scandal. "God, no. A practical guide. Love like you'd audit. A financial planner's guide to protecting your heart and assets." He laughed, and I realized I hadn't heard genuine laughter in my life for years. "That's terrible. I love it." 6 months later, we were having dinner at my cottage when Aaron called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "I'm getting married," he said without preamble. "Not to Addison. Someone new. I wanted you to hear it from me." "Congratulations," I said, meaning it. "I hope you're honest with her." "I am. About everything. Claire." He paused. "I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserved better." "Yes," I agreed, "I did, but I'm giving it to myself now." After hanging up, I returned to the table where Ethan was plating our dinner. Nothing fancy, just grilled fish and salad. Honest food for an honest life. "Everything okay?" he asked. I looked around my small kitchen, at the ocean visible through windows I'd chosen, at a man who'd shown up consistently for months without asking for more than I could give. "Everything's perfect," I said. "Not fairy tale perfect, real perfect. Messy and complicated and mine. Later, we walked on the beach, and I thought about that Kipling quote about meeting triumph and disaster, treating those imposters just the same. I'd met both, survived both. The oceans stretched endlessly before us, and I realized I'd stopped looking back. I don't regret loving him, I told Ethan as waves lapped our feet. I just regret believing that loving someone meant disappearing into them. He took my hand, a simple gesture that asked nothing but offered everything. The best love stories aren't about finding someone to complete you. They're about finding someone who appreciates how complete you already are. I squeezed his hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of possibility. Somewhere in Charleston, Erin was starting over with someone new. Somewhere else, Addison was probably painting her next masterpiece of deception. And here I stood, no longer defined by either of them, finally understanding that the most profound love story I'd ever write would be the one where I chose myself. The waves whispered secrets to the shore, and I listened, finally fluent in the language of my own worth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new chances to help women recognize their value before it was too late. But tonight, I was simply Claire. Not Claire Whitmore, not the doctor's wife, not the woman scorned, just Claire, standing at the edge of the ocean, holding the hand of someone who saw her clearly and stayed anyway. It wasn't the ending I'd planned when I'd said, "I do," 12 years ago. It was better. It was real. It was mine. And that, I realized as stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, was the most beautiful truth of all.